One December night, a long, long time ago, a family sat around the fireplace in their home. A golden light from the fire filled the room. The mother and father laughed at something their oldest daughter had just said. The girl was 17, much older than her little brother and sister, who were only 5 and 6 years old. A very old woman, the family's grandmother, sat knitting in the warmest corner of the room. And a baby, the youngest child, smiled at the fire's light from its tiny bed. This family had found happiness in the worst place in all of New England. They had built their home high up in the White Mountains, where the wind blows violently all year long. The family lived in an especially cold and dangerous spot. Stones from the top of the mountain above their house would often roll down the mountainside and wake them in the middle of the night. No other family lived near them on the mountain, but this family was never lonely. They enjoyed each other's company and often had visitors. Their house was built near an important road that connected the White Mountains to the St. Lawrence River. People traveling through the mountains in wagons always stopped at the family's door for a drink of water and a friendly word. Lonely travelers crossing the mountains on foot would step into the house to share a hot meal. Sometimes the wind became so wild and cold that these strangers would spend the night with the family. The family offered every traveler who stopped at their home a kindness that money could not buy. On that December evening, the wind came rushing down the mountain. It seemed to stop at their house to knock at the door before it roared down into the valley. The family fell silent for a moment, but then they realized that someone really was knocking at their door. The oldest girl opened the door and found a young man standing in the dark. The old grandmother put a chair near the fireplace for him. The oldest daughter gave him a warm, shy smile, and the baby held up its little arms to him. "This fire is just what I needed," the young man said. "The wind has been blowing in my face for the last 2 hours." The father took the young man's travel bag. "Are you going to Vermont?" the older man asked. "Yes, to Burlington," the traveler replied. "I wanted to reach the valley tonight, but when I saw the light in your window, I decided to stop. I would like to sit and enjoy your fire and your company for a while." As the young man took his place by the fire, something like heavy footsteps was heard outside. It sounded as if someone was running down the side of the mountain, taking enormous steps. The father looked out one of the windows. "That old mountain has thrown another stone at us again. He must have been afraid we would forget him. He sometimes shakes his head and makes us think he will come down on top of us," the father explained to the young man. "But we are old neighbors," he smiled, "and we manage to get along together pretty well. Besides, I have made a safe hiding place outside to protect us in case a slide brings the mountain down on our heads." As the father spoke, the mother prepared a hot meal for their guest. While he ate, he talked freely to the family, as if it were his own. This young man did not trust people easily. Yet on this evening, something made him share his deepest secret with these simple mountain people. The young man's secret was that he was ambitious. He did not know what he wanted to do with his life yet, but he did know that he did not want to be forgotten after he had died. He believed that sometime during his life he would become famous and be admired by thousands of people. "So far," the young man said, "I have done nothing. If I disappeared tomorrow from the face of the earth, no one would know anything about me. No one would ask, 'Who was he? Where did he go?' But I cannot die until I have reached my destiny. Then let death come. I will have built my monument." The young man's powerful emotions touched the family. They smiled. "You laugh at me," the young man said, taking the oldest daughter's hand. "You think my ambition is silly. She was very shy, and her face became pink with embarrassment. "It is better to sit here by the fire," she whispered, "and be happy even if nobody thinks of us." Her father stared into the fire. "I think there is something natural in what the young man says. And his words have made me think about our lives here. It would have been nice if we had had a little farm down in the valley. Some place where we could see our mountains without being afraid they would fall on our heads. I would have been respected by all our neighbors, and when I had grown old, I would die happy in my bed. You would put a stone over my grave so everyone would know I lived an honest life." "You see," the young man cried out, "it is in our nature to want a monument. Some want only a stone on their grave. Others want to be a part of everyone's memory. But we all want to be remembered after we die." The young man threw some more wood on the fire to chase away the darkness. The firelight fell on the little group around the fireplace. The father's strong arms and the mother's gentle smile. It touched the young man's proud face and the daughter's shy one. It warmed the old grandmother, still knitting in the corner. She looked up from her knitting, and with her fingers still moving the needles she said, "Old people have their secrets just as young people do." The old woman said she had made her funeral clothes some years earlier. They were the finest clothes she had made since her wedding dress. She said her secret was a fear that she would not be buried in her best clothes. The young man stared into the fire. "Old and young," he said, "we dream of graves and monuments. I wonder how sailors feel when their ship is sinking. And they know they will be buried in the wide and nameless grave that is the ocean." A sound rising like the roar of the ocean shook the house. Young and old exchanged one wild look. Then the same words burst from all their lips. "The slide, the slide." They rushed away from the house into the darkness, to the secret spot the father had built to protect them from the mountain slide. The whole side of the mountain came rushing toward the house like a waterfall of destruction. But just before it reached the little house, the wave of earth divided in two and went around the family's home. Everyone and everything in the path of the terrible slide was destroyed, except the little house. The next morning smoke was seen coming from the chimney of the house on the mountain. Inside the fire was still burning. The chairs were still drawn up in a half circle around the fireplace. It looked as if the family had just gone out for a walk. Some people thought that a stranger had been with the family on that terrible night. But no one ever discovered who the stranger was. His name and way of life remained a mystery. His body was never found. Bogles Family Restaurant on 8th Avenue is not a famous place, but if you need a large, cheap meal, then Bogles is the place for you. There are 12 tables in the room, 6 on each side. Bogles himself sits at the desk by the door and takes the money. There are also 2 waitresses and a voice. The voice comes from the kitchen. At the time of my story, one of the waitresses was called Aileen. She was tall, beautiful, and full of life. The name of the other waitress was Tildy. She was small, fat, and was not beautiful. Most of the people who came to eat at Bogles were men, and they loved the beautiful Aileen. They were happy to wait a long time for their meals because they could look at her. Aileen knew how to hold a conversation with 12 people and work hard at the same time. And all the men wanted to take Aileen dancing or give her presents. One gave her a gold ring and one gave her a little dog. And poor Tildy. In the busy, noisy restaurant, men's eyes did not follow Tildy. Nobody laughed and talked with her. Nobody asked her to go dancing, and nobody gave her presents. She was a good waitress, but when she stood by the tables, the men looked round her to see Aileen. But Tildy was happy to work with no thanks. She was happy to see the men with Aileen. She was happy to know that the men loved Aileen. She was Aileen's friend. But deep inside, she too wanted a man to love her. Tildy listened to all Aileen's stories. One day, Aileen came in with a black eye. A man hit her because she did not want to kiss him. How wonderful to have a black eye for love, Tildy thought. One of the men who came to Bogles was a young man called Mr. Cedars. He was a small, thin man, and he worked in an office. He knew that Aileen was not interested in him, so he sat at one of Tildy's tables, said nothing, and ate his fish. One day, when Mr. Cedars came in for his meal, he drank too much beer. He finished his fish, got up, put his arm around Tildy, kissed her loudly, and walked out of the restaurant. For a few seconds, Tildy just stood there. Then Aileen said to her, "Why, Tildy, you bad girl? I must watch you. I don't want to lose my men to you." Suddenly, Tildy's world changed. She understood now that men could like her and want her as much as Aileen. She, Tildy, could have a love life too. Her eyes were bright and her face was pink. She wanted to tell everybody her secret. When the restaurant was quiet, she went and stood by Bogles' desk. "Do you know what a man in the restaurant did to me today?" she said. "He put his arm around me, and he kissed me." "Really?" Bogle answered. "This was good for business. Next week you'll get $1 a week more." And when, in the evening, the restaurant was busy again, Tildy put down the food on the tables and said quietly, "Do you know what a man in the restaurant did to me today? He put his arm around me and kissed me." Some of the men in the restaurant were surprised. Some of them said, "Well done." Men began to smile and say nice things to her. Tildy was very happy. Love was now possible in her gray life. For 2 days, Mr. Cedars did not come again. And in that time, Tildy was a different woman. She wore bright clothes, did her hair differently, and she looked taller and thinner. Now she was a real woman because someone loved her. She felt excited and a little afraid. What would Mr. Cedars do the next time he came in? At 4 o'clock in the afternoon of the third day, Mr. Cedars came in. There were no people at the tables, and Aileen and Tildy were working at the back of the restaurant. Mr. Cedars walked up to them. Tildy looked at him, and she could not speak. Mr. Cedars' face was very red, and he looked uncomfortable. "Miss Tildy," he said, "I want to say that I'm sorry for what I did to you a few days ago. It was the drink, you see. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm very sorry." And Mr. Cedars left. But Tildy ran into the kitchen, and she began to cry. She could not stop crying. She was no longer beautiful. No man loved her. No man wanted her. The kiss meant nothing to Mr. Cedars. Tildy did not like him very much, but the kiss was important to her. And now there was nothing. But she still had her friend, and Aileen put her arm around Tildy. Aileen did not really understand, but she said, "Don't be unhappy, Tildy. That little Cedars has got a face like a dead potato. He's nothing. A real man never says sorry."